This conference will now be recorded.
Good. Good morning, everyone, and happy Election Day. I am pleased to welcome everyone to today's regular meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District, preceded by the Audit Committee meeting at our second Dogga Field office. For members of the public attending remotely, the agenda are available at hrbrrd.newyork.gov under Board Meetings. We ask that you please close other programs on your computer or phone. Silence your cell phone and mute your audio when not speaking. The conference organizer will monitor the program's chat function for public comment. I'd like to call this meeting of the Audit Committee.
This is Megan.
Megan, you are not muted.
Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could I have a call to orders?
You want a roll call?
Everybody pledge. We had to pledge allegiance. Roll call, please.
Committee Chair Albert Hayes.
Here.
Committee members Kenneth DeWitt.
Here.
And Richard Byrd.
Here.
Board Chair Mark Finkel.
Here.
Board members Alfred Candido.
Here.
Timothy Reagan.
Here.
Nicole Allen.
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan.
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie here. Chief Engineer Robert Foldan.
Here.
Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha.
Here.
And Director of Administrative Services Stephanie Ruzicki.
Here.
Everybody's accounted for.
Thank you. Now I'd like to have a motion to adopt the revised meeting agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mr. DeWitt, Mr.
Second.
Byrd.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now I'd like to have the approval of the March 29, 2023 Audit Committee meeting minutes.
I will.
Yeah.
Mr. Byrd,
Oh, that way.
I'll second it.
you're not on the
No,
call.
That's what I just asked.
I'll second it.
Mr. DeWitt. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And now we have some new business. We had a presentation of independent audit by Nora Galeros of Galeros Robinson Certified Public Accountant, LLP, for the year ending June 30. Mr. Minicha?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It'd be my pleasure here to introduce Nora, who is the engagement partner of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District's financial statements audit for the year ended June 30th, 2023. Nora is a partner of Galeros Robinson Certified Public Accountants and in charge of the firm's government and not-for-profit group. She has over 20 years of experience in performing financial audits and compliance engagements in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. Before getting started and turning things over to Nora, I just wanted to thank our colleagues, Anna Tracy and Kim Scott, for their hard work on the audit, as well as Nora and her colleagues, Hartney, Hazel, and John, for their extraordinary effort and commitment to getting the audit completed in a timely manner. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nora.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, so I'm here to present the result of the 2022 audit. So as you know, this materials is lengthy. It's about 85 pages. But of course, I'm just going to go over the highlights. So the required communications, if you are going to read through it at a later time, it's on pages 3 to 7. And that is with attachments included, from pages 8 to 17. And then the financial statement highlights is from pages 18 to 26. And the financial statements, the full financial statements with two of our opinions, which I will go into those later. They are on pages 28 to 80. And then the management representation letter, which is a required documentation, That's on pages 81, 85. That's a documentation. We do require sign off by Tim and John, of course, before the issuance of the final report. So you just go to the second page, page 2, actually page 3. So I am here this morning to present the result because it's really required by standards. We're not only depending on management to present the results to you, we are required by auditing standards to actually communicate with those who are charged with governance. Next page, please. So in our communication, again, we are to reiterate our responsibility, okay? So Galeros Robinson is independent of management. We are not part of a day-to-day, management or operating of the regulating district. We are independent and we have to perform sufficient amount of work so that we'll be able to support our opinion. So although we do review the financial statements of the regulating district, that doesn't relieve management and you of your responsibility to review your financial statements also. So we are independently providing our opinion again based on the amount of work that we did. Now, our work is not just the standards of Galeros Robinson. It's the standards generally accepted in the US, as well as the government auditing standards issued by the Controller General of the United States. So, the second set of standards require that we look into not only the numbers presented to us by Tim or by management, but we are also to look into the internal control structure. Because as you know, the numbers are numbers, but how it's processed is more important so that we can rely on the numbers at the end of the day. So we noted no material weakness, just so you know, under no significant deficiencies. So we have some observations which we have communicated to Tim verbally, and I will go into it in a little bit. So if you look at the adjusting journal entries, you've noticed of them, okay? And why do we have adjusting journal entries if you do not have a material weakness or a significant deficiency? So what are those? On a day-to-day basis, for the most part, the regulating district are reporting the transactions on a more cash basis, if you will. Okay. Although receivables are recorded, but at the end of the day, there are some payables that needed to be booked because your financial statements need to be presented on an accrual basis. What that means is that it's not only those expenses that you have already paid by June 30, 2023, you also have to acknowledge your liabilities at the end of the year. Okay, they are expenses already incurred, but they are not paid and they had to be booked. And so when I mentioned about no material weaknesses or no significant deficiencies, we've always been pushing things to go ahead, go after the year end, those transactions that you were paid in July, in August, September, until we finish the audit, to move them back to the year they were actually incurred and not actually paid. So that's have been our question, that have been our observations. There are also journal entries required by government, GASB, and those are pensions. So we look at pension statements from the state, we looked at there are new standards that had been, implemented, including leases. Leases are no longer recorded when you pay them. You also have to acknowledge the right of use, and part of that right of use had been expired, if you will, because the contract had, gotten shorter and shorter. So part of that would have to be expensed. So those are adjusting journal entries that needed to be made at the end of the year to make the books correct. Now, are there any misstatements to the best of our knowledge that had not been recorded? We would say none. Okay, so all the recommended, we can only propose the adjusting journal entries. We can only propose the management. It would be up to management to accept them for them. So Tim had accepted the journal entries. We discussed them and he fully understood what they are, and they have been boxed and there are no known misstatements, if you will. So your financial statements at the end of the day, we've said our opinion is not materially misstated. In other words, it's fairly stated. So we're not giving you an absolute assurance. It's because we're not looking into the transactions 100%, right? We're doing our significant amount of work, but not 100%. So let me just go into the financial highlights. Again, as you can see, the financial statement's so thick, so I'm just gonna go over the highlights. Okay, if you looked at your assets, your current cash and cash equivalents went up by $2.4 million, okay? Accounts receivable went down, lease receivable went down also. Why is that? It's because your leases with the usage, right, of the dams were on short term. So they are no longer considered long-term leases, and therefore they are on a year-to-year basis, if you will. Now, prepaid expenses was more related to real estate taxes. Now, the state was very nice, they had removed that particular expense out of your P&L, and therefore you did not pay any taxes, unlike before, you had prepaid your real estate taxes at the end of June 30, 2023. So if we go to the next page, please, page 20.
Just a little bit slow. Bear with me.
By the way, please note the increase in your cash and cash equivalents, that's including your short-term investments with the state, this TIP. It's 2.4, it generated some interest income, which I will show you in a little bit in the P&L.
Just bear with me.
It's okay.
Audit committee. Thank you.
So while we're looking to move to the next page, I just would like to thank Tim and his team. John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As you know, having a financial statements issued 3 months after the year end, that's tough, but we really step up and continue to have the information we needed to complete the report.
Back on track.
There, liabilities. Okay. So if you compare your liabilities from the prior year, it moved up by 2.5 million. But the reason why it is because we now have to, or the regulating district has to recognize also the related liability to the leases, because leases are now assets, the right of use are now assets, but you also have an obligation to pay for those leases. So it's kind of a wash in a way, but it's just putting them in the box, okay? So that's what happens. But this is the most interesting part. This is your net position or the equity of the regulating district at the end of the day. So if you look at the very bottom, it's $2.2 million in a negative, right? In the previous year, it was also in a negative of 4.8 million. So both negatives, they're not in a happy place, but it has improved a lot by $2.6 million. So let's look at your operating revenues. Your operating revenue is pretty much stable. 8 million last year, 8.1 million, and this year is 8 million. So you might have noticed the water power service of 788 is showing up separated from the lease revenue. But if you added them both, it's pretty much the same, right? If you add both of them. It's really more on the terminology required by the GASB or the Government Standards, Accounting Standards Board. You now have short-term leases expiring within 1 year. It was only for 6 months, and I know you're negotiating that. So therefore, they are recognized as a revenue and not a lease revenue because it's a short-term lease. But again, in total, it's the same. Operating expenses. Operating expenses from last year was 4.6, and this year is $5.6 million. So if you looked at it, it's really driven by two items. The first one is the other post-employment benefits, which was in a negative last year. What that was is that there was a favorable swing in the recognition of OPEB or other post-employment benefits is because it was evaluated after 2 years and the actual experience a lot favorable compared to what was originally projected. But in 2023, it's now, the actual is now close to projections. It required the regulating district to recognize an expense towards of 409,137. But what's relevant in here, which is really in the present time, is your real estate taxes. It has a favorable effect on your operating expenses of $2.5 million. Okay. So added all that, it improved the bottom line of the regulating district's equity at June 30, 2023.
Help me understand that post-benefit one more time. Go through that, the difference in the amounts is due to what?
Okay,
So
so,
we went from 3.2 million, 3.3 million to a favorable 409,000.
okay, in 2022, you made some projections like from, it's accumulative. Last year, there was an evaluation. There is, it's a lot of estimates, right? It's
Yeah.
based on life expectancy of the people in the pool, right?
But doesn't that just go right back to national norms?
So,
And doesn't the state provide you with those numbers to use to generate that?
so we have to distinguish between pension,
Uh-huh,
which we're not talking about.
Yep,
and
yep.
Retiree health.
It'd be the
benefits,
medicals. The medical would be the biggest thing.
Principally.
Yeah.
So what's unusual about this table is you don't often see something where it is a negative expense.
Mhm.
That's what you see in other
2022.
post-employment benefits where the expense is actually negative, meaning like
Yeah.
positive. And the reason why it was so favorable is because, as Nora was saying, these are long-term actuarially projected, valued estimates of how much the regulating district is going to incur for retiree health care
Over that period of time.
over a very long period of time. And the driver of why that in 2022 was so favorable is nothing really more than interest rates went up fairly dramatically. So when you think about net present value, right? The same outflow projected over 30 years didn't change dramatically based on life expectancy, medical inflation, things like that. But if you are using a bigger discount rate, the net present value of that stream of payments is much less. John, if you would go back to,
And it's driven by interest rates.
in
So-
this particular case,
But when you don't have the cash set aside for that, so in other words, it's not cash that's been put aside.
there are no
for that.
assets,
So
correct.
why would that's the part I'm confused on.
Okay. So you make contribution towards it every year. It's an actual money, right, going in
Uh-huh.
there. But at the same time, it's put aside, but you also have a liability calculating based on the life expectancy of the people in the pool, right?
Yeah.
And assuming that the money that you already have will generate interest. Now, in the projection before, the interest was really, really low. In
Okay.
other words,
Okay, so you're actually saying the money has been put aside and it doesn't come back to the regulating districts and the county and all that on an annual basis. There's X amount of money's put aside and that's what you're.
No.
Okay,
There are no assets
it's, okay. This is
to fund. We pay, right?
On an
every
annual basis.
Yes.
Well, we pay every month the healthcare bill for both active
Yeah.
and retired employees.
Mhm.
That's a cash basis expense.
Mhm.
But there are no assets set aside to fund the liability that you see there under other post-employment benefits
Mhm.
in the current, in the year that just ended,
Correct, sorry,
13,377,875.
That's
What's not able to be seen on the screen is that the last time, when we sat in this chair 1 year ago and we were looking at the same table,
Mhm.
the 2022 number, 13,439,613, it was the same last year as it is presented here. The year prior, the number was 16.8 million. So for the year ended June 30, 2021, our OPEB liability was 16.8 million as a result of the actuarial valuation, which GASB Statement 75 requires us to undertake every 2 years. During that valuation, interest rates had gone up during the period. So the stream of payments that we will make is less in present dollars because we discount that stream by a bigger number.
If you go to page 66, there's a table there. There's a table
66?
there. Yeah, page 66. So, yeah, let me correct myself. So there is no cash, but the liability is being built every single year for the total pool of individuals part of that OPEB, okay? So that liability was calculated or projected, actuarially projected based on a low an interest, right? An interest amount. So look at this. So the total liability in 2022 was 16 million. If you have to pay everybody, like if you have to pay your liability today, right? That's 16 million of OPEB, okay? Now, there is a service cost associated with all this service, right? So that's the calculated service cost. The interest cost associated with that liability is right there, 333,229. Now, the difference between expected and actual experience, this is what's generating that favorable or unfavorable every single year based on that actuarial evaluation. Last year was, when you look at the expected and actual experience based on what had happened in 2022, they were saying that your liability is overstated based on assumptions. So they're saying, okay, it's not 16 million after all, it's 3.6 million less. So that's why your liability at the end of 2022 was only 13.4 million. So it's narrowing down now that because the interest in 2022 is in a way similar to 2023. There is not much of a swing in interest, right? But if you compare 2022 to prior years, the interest rate there's a huge disparity in interest rate. So now it's 13.4 million, similar to last
So the comparison between the 2 years is what, because the change in fiscal year 2022 was so dramatic and so favorable to the regulating district that when you take a more regular year, like the one we just finished, it looks very strange in comparison because we didn't have the same kind of enormous favorable outcome in the year that just ended as we did the prior year, when with respect to other post-employment benefits.
year. And it was also a policy change that it's also discouraging what we call the Cadillac plan in the prior year. There was a Cadillac plan that was allowed, meaning, really premium plan. And the IR said, no more of that, so let's just go normal, in other words. So that was also part of the calculation in the past, so now it's also affecting.
We can spend as much time to,
Don't-
not now, you and me
yes,
together,
yes.
we can spend as much time as you like on this, because it's complicated, but it's also very consequential. If you look at our balance sheet, it is the far and away the largest liability that the regulating district has, and in that regard is not very different than the other 90,000 state and local governments out there
Yeah.
that are also carrying an enormous liability for promises made and which are going to be fulfilled over a very long period of time as people who have retired and will retire, right, have been promised assistance and healthcare benefits going long into the future.
I think that, because I don't understand it yet, but I take a look at, I understand what you're saying, your interest rate changes. If the money's set aside, my interest rate goes up, my net present value of the money versus 10 years from now, I'm gonna have more buying power with what I have now if the interest rates continue to go up over that period of time, if it doesn't keep up with inflation. So I understand that part, but when I take a look at it, there's no money set aside, that's where I get lost. So you fill out, we'll make some time, just so I understand.
Look forward to it.
Because I'm not smart enough to understand that.
It's a complicated thing.
Well, it's gotta be. I mean, I'm not that it has to be that complicated for me not to understand, but and it's a big, like you said, it's a big number.
It is a big number,
It drives all your other numbers.
for sure.
Okay, so if you could just go to the.
And one thing on the Cadillac plan, when those Cadillac plans, when you deducted that, then all the Cadillac plans basically went away.
Yes, it's no longer, yes. I don't think it's offered in.
From an accounting perspective, we
Yeah.
haven't changed the benefits
So
we
your
offer.
plan's still the same.
The way.
But you didn't have a Cadillac plan. You had a
Well,
Chevy?
It's a
There
very
was a
nice
Yugo.
Chevy.
It's a nice Chevy.
It's a nice Chevy?
It's a generous benefit.
Maybe a
In
Buick.
that regard, we're not terribly different than the other 90,000 state and local governments that are out there as well.
Oh, it's that nice, huh?
It's the new study, it used to be not in the books, like you were going on a pay, as you go basis. But GASB is mandating that everybody put it in the box so that you don't, get loss of the huge liability in the future, yes.
John, the heated seats made healthcare go down.
So if you just go back to the previous page, please. Non-operating expenses, there, operating expenses. So in your, going back to that, so the biggest driver of the reduction with, with taking out the OPEB, it's really the real estate taxes. Now, there is a decrease in your contractual services. It's because there was a decrease in engineering, contractual services related to Stillwater. It's about $400,000 there. So that's the reason for the decrease. Next page. So again, at the end of the year, it's still in a negative on your equity side in net assets, but it had gone down by 2.6 million. That's a very significant amount of.
And just to give, I'm sorry, Nora, just to interrupt for a second, but just for a little bit more historical perspective. A few years ago, when we were sitting in the equivalent of this room, the net assets end of the year was negative 10 million. It's now down to a negative 2.2 million. So this is the series of actions taken over, some of which we had control over and some of which we did not, like the direction of interest rates. But the trend here is, while not yet positive, is a much less negative net position than it was just a few years ago.
Okay, so again, cash went up, and it's really the function of operations, right? So you yield more revenues than your expenses, and therefore, it also increased your cash. So the rest of the information in here, again, are details of the financial highlights, and the last 3 pages of the presentation is the management representation letter. Again, it required management to acknowledge the fact that we were provided with truthful and accurate information that we needed in order to complete the audit. Without that, we could not issue a report. So that's signed off by Tim and by management. So, and it also an acknowledgement that management and the board, you guys are responsible for designing an internal control structure so that it would work effectively and would generate accurate information on a monthly basis, on a day-to-day basis, really. And then the financial statements would become accurate as well as a result of the processes and the controls in place. So with that, I thank you so much and for the trust and also for the time today. And thank you.
Thank you Thank very you. much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora.
Are there any questions?
Very good,
I guess that's for you to say.
very good presentation. Any questions? If not, hearing none, I'd like to make a motion for adjournment.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
Mr. Witt, Mr. Byrd,
All in favor?
Aye.
out at 10:30.
Motion carries and we are adjourned. So you can have that back now.
Ready to keep going?
Yes.
Call the November meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulated District to order. Mr. Leslie, roll call, please.
Board Chair Mark Finkel.
Here.
First Vice Chair Kenneth DeWitt.
Here.
Second Vice Chair Alfred Candido.
Here.
Board members Albert Hayes.
Here.
Richard Byrd.
Here.
Timothy Reagan.
Here.
And Nicole Allen.
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan.
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie here. Chief Engineer Robert Fulton.
Here.
Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha.
Here.
And the Director of Administrative Services Stephanie Rizzi. All accounted for.
Thank you very much. I need a motion to adopt the meeting agenda.
Can I make that motion?
Mr. Hayes.
Second,
Oh, sir.
Mr. Candido.
all in favor?
Aye.
Do we have any guests? I know. Okay, public comment period, no.
Let me just pause if I may.
Is
Mr.
there anybody
Chairman,
online?
ask Megan if anybody has a
Oh, let's have a good
message
about.
that would like to be heard remotely.
I have not gotten any messages that anyone wants to speak publicly.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, I missed that. I need a motion approval of the October 11th regular board meeting minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Ms. Allen?
Any second additions or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Our next is the consideration of the appeal resolution proposal presented by Mr. Bresney at the October 11th, 2023 board meeting. We tabled a motion on the last meeting, and maybe, would you read that motion back that's on the table?
Mr. Byrd had moved and Mr. DeWitt had seconded a motion to consider a proposed compromise advanced by Mr. Bresney to resolve the appeal. That compromise involved the planned move both the north and the south ends of a retaining wall in front of 379 South Shore Road in by 5 feet, reducing the total width of the wall by 10 feet, and reducing the total wall area to approximately 170 square feet, which would be below, as Mr. Bresney asserts, what to be a 200 square foot threshold for APA Section 814 review. Mr. Bresney also proposed to eliminate 2 4-inch by 4-foot groundwater drainage extensions now existing within the 5-foot areas of the retaining walls to be removed. Mr. Bresney noted that the total length of the wall remaining in front of 379 South Shore Road would be 30 feet, which he asserted is less than the adjacent 31-foot long retaining wall, which Mr. Bresney had constructed on his access permit area 1536-3 in front of 377 South Shore Road. Mr. Bresney noted that the executive director, as part of the determination requiring removal of the retaining wall in front of 379 South Shore Road, had given permission for the newly constructed 31-foot wall in front of 377 South Shore Road to remain. I believe that accurately recites where we are. So
Okay.
we had a motion, then Mr. Hayes, seconded by Mr. Reagan, tabled that motion. So now back on the agenda is
Right.
Mr. Bresney's proposal to
So
resolve.
just to be sure, a yes vote is for, is it?
A yes vote right now on the motion pending would enable Mr. Bresney to retain the existing wall,
Okay,
removing the 2 outside 5-foot sections. basically it.
That's what's on the screen from the.
All right, so- Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yeah, I'm gonna,
well, before we call for
Okay.
that vote, could I please have a review of the director's recommendation,
sure.
which was in response to that proposal?
Yeah, my recommendation would be to allow the wall at 377 South Shore Road to remain. The wall at 379 South Shore Road to come down, except for the portion of the wall that's on Mr. Bresna's property. I've, in recent site visits, indicated to him that he could keep the drain extension in place and the shorter upper wall in place. Now, we'll have to work with Mr. Bresney and his contractor from an engineering perspective to make sure. He's talking about the elements of my proposal that won't work, so obviously we don't want to pursue something that wouldn't work, but in short, my recommendation is the bulk of this wall would come down. And that would only be, I guess, before the board, depending on how this vote goes, the first vote.
So everything above the red line, is that what we're saying comes down?
No.
Okay, I just
The wall, the line of that upper wall is a little bit up here, and you'll recall in my message to the board, where the board asked me to get into a little bit of my thinking in suggesting this resolution, is that even though this is not 18 inches exactly, the upper wall is, in my mind, close to the 18 inches that the board adopted as part of its seeker in 1980.
Do you have the cross section here that showed the grade that you proposed to?
Mr. Bresney, I think, put that in his proposal. So this is a good view of that upper wall as well.
That's the part that's come down.
I think I would suggest most of this wall, I think his property line is about here, Mr. Reagan, so all of this would come out.
Anybody have anything else? Yeah, we spent a lot of time on this, and I think we're ready for a vote. So I will call the question, hearing no,
Do we have a chance to ask just a couple more questions?
Oh, sure.
When you scoped that project out with a contractor, did you have drawings or anything that you took to the contractor and, to help get you an idea of the cost of it or the scope of the project and stuff of going through there?
We didn't have any drawings. We did, he gave me a quote for, rebuilding 2 walls in kind. The walls were there, so there was this wall and that wall. And so he gave me a quote for rebuilding them, and we talked about how we were gonna do it. But as far as sketches and drawings, we didn't have any sketches or drawings.
Okay, but you must have laid out something there for him to be able to give you a quote of what it was gonna cost to go from there in time, because your wall you got now appears to be higher and stuff than what the original wall was that was there. There's quite a bit of difference there on that, on those two.
The old wall deteriorated, so.
Yeah, no, I understand that totally, yeah.
Down, but
Yeah.
width-wise, they're the same. The 377 wall was the same length as what you're seeing here, about 30 or 41 feet. And the 379 wall was about 40 feet. So they went by the same footprint. So all this footprint was the same. And, axially where it is closer, far from the water, it's in the same spot, and all the topography stayed the same. But there's this, it's probably a picture in here someplace where it rolled back. So this bottom wall is probably the height of what was left of the old wall, and then it rolled back. And so instead of having it rolled back, we stepped it back and put it in the second 18-inch wall to kind of maintain.
Yeah, and so you had this, this came back to you, and tell me to shut up, but everybody, you guys, anyway, because I'm just trying to, I'm having a heck of a problem with this, because you come across and you're very detailed in what you do and what you're scoping out, what you're showing us and stuff like that, and then there's this access permit that says no. And then, so I'm trying to piece the things together and saying, okay, how do we go from no? Then you had to contact a contractor, and I don't believe you're a guy that would sit there and not give that contractor a pretty good idea of what he needed to do because of cost. I'm just thinking that might be you, but maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before many times. So this thing just doesn't make sense to me when I go through it. But when I read everything, I think I know what I have.
I got a really short 6-page thing today. Could I hand that out and go through it?
Anybody need to see it? Or,
Agree.
I mean, we spent a lot of time on this.
Yeah, I know. That's why I made it so short. But the bottom line is just what we achieved. So Mr. Callahan accepted this. This one meets the APA and the DEC regulations by virtue of rebuilding kind under 200 square feet. And, that pretty much put back what you had. So Mr. Callahan in his May 1st letter to me said this one could remain in place. This one meets the DEC regulation with respect to, rebuilding kind, but it doesn't meet the APA regulation with respect to under 200 square feet. So by dropping this down by 5 feet on each end, we really achieve 3 things. One is that it still meets the DEC regulation, but it also meets the APA regulation at that point. It drops it down to about 170 square feet. It also reduces the width to less than the width on this. I know it's concerned about the width of the wall. So this one, the width is about 31. It drops us down to about 30, plus or minus. It's not a machine piece of equipment here, but it's plus or minus 30 feet. And then the drain line doesn't seem to be offensive. The foundation drains underneath this house would be exposed, so we can get rid of the other 4-foot extensions that seem to be objective as well. So at the end of the day, this would be in compliance with New York State regulations, and this would be in compliance with New York State regulations. So I'm not really asking for a variance. I'm asking for acceptance of something that I put into compliance with the New York State regulations.
Okay, now we have a motion on the table. Any last comments on this? And again, just to be clear, because it's kind of a weirdly, a yes vote will be for him to keep it, is that correct?
Yes.
And a no vote would be, we're rejecting the appeal, not the appeal, but.
We're rejecting his proposal
His
to
proposal.
resolve the appeal.
Right.
The appeal will still be out there.
Right. So I'm gonna call for a vote. Any other, okay, all those in favor? All those opposed?
Aye.
The motion does not carry.
Motion does not carry. And like we say, it was unanimous.
It was unanimous.
May I make a motion, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, sure.
On the subject of the appeal,
We have it right here. Oh, it's okay, go ahead.
I want to make a motion to accept the recommendation of the executive director to resolve the appeal.
Is that what that says, pretty much?
Basically. But
We have some wording. Do you
Oh,
mind if we read
okay,
it?
well then, go ahead, I yield to better wording.
I know yours is pretty clear.
You made the motion to determination, the executive director in the matter of Mr. Bresney's appeal, allowing the wall on the New York State property at 377 South Shore Road to remain in place, and requiring that the portion of the wall on New York State property at 379 South Shore Road be removed under conditions prescribed in a work permit issued by the regulating district.
We have a second?
Second.
We need any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Could we discuss that, because what Mr. Callahan proposed is not possible to do. So I need to understand.
You're going to need a work permit to be able to do anything else. And that work permit, you'll need to discuss with staff, who will be in a position to
Yeah, we'll meet.
outline what you
For the
need.
board, we'll meet with Mr. Bresney on site, obviously. and go
Okay.
through-
Just a question on that, John. Do we need any time frame set up?
We're going into the, obviously a time of year not conducive to doing a lot of work. I'm sure Mr. Bresney's gonna raise some concerns about exactly what we want him to do. There will be, as I'm sure the board wants, some dialogue so that we can get to a place where he can accomplish what we want him to do. And then we'll set some timeframes out for that one to be accomplished in the spring.
And can we do maps or drawings or something like that, so we know exactly what
Sure.
we're doing?
Okay.
Okay, so just to make sure I got this straight, we're not asking him to take it down right now. We're saying he's got till spring sometime to get things
So
resolved.
we'll work
And
with,
you guys agree with what's gonna be?
we'll work with council to generate a letter, latest in our chain of correspondence with Mr. Bresney, notifying him officially. Obviously, he's here today, the board's decision and laying out a time frame, which again, given the time of year, we're gonna be flexible on.
Right. Okay, let's move on to the report of the executive director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report appears on pages 15 and 16 in your packet. In recognition of the robust agenda today, I'll just note a couple of things and say, what a year it's been. Under the board's leadership, we just completed the first of many capital improvements touted for years by the chief engineer at Hawkinsville. And long and winding road, Mike best describe that project. But a good outcome certainly. And just next week, our contractor will be mobilizing to Indian Lake to complete that rehabilitation project. And looking ahead to 2024, we're just going to continue this chain of progress here, adding work permit functionality to the permit system so people can apply for through the online system a work permit and pay their $10 fee. We'll be negotiating a new collective bargaining agreement with the union, adopting a new 3-year spending plan, which may be more interesting than ever given the different events, and hopefully beginning construction on Old Forge and Six Lake as well, and maybe even with our partners in state government at OGS going out to bid on a major project at Conklinville. And obviously looking to resolve, nobody relishes the prospect of being in litigation with either Stillwater Associates or Brookfield Renewable. So working to resolve those disputes as well.
Don't say nobody.
I won't say nobody, and general counsel will have more during his presentation on both of those issues. But just really, just as it is the last meeting of the year, I think on behalf of not just executive staff, but the team here, recognize the board's support. Tim earlier in the meeting referenced, closing an $8 million plus gap in our finances and getting down to where the liability from over 10 million down to just 2.2. And I think that is reflective of what this team has done, not just over the last 5 years, certainly the groundwork laid by great people here for many, many years. But it is a record of success, and we're going to keep it going with the board's support. So with that, I'll yield for any questions members may have.
Is this a good time for us to mention our field trip?
Yeah, I think it would be a great time. When Smolin began here at the regulating district, the chairman and then executive director Smolin went to visit some of our other sister agencies within the Adirondack Park area, and Mark and I will be doing that later this month. Just sort of a meet and greet, for there are a lot of new people in place at both APA and the DEC region, and it's good as we do communicate and collaborate at the staff level all the time. It's also good to check in with the leadership of some of those agencies as well.
The last time we did this, we got into the APA and the director sat down and goes, "Now, what do you guys do?" So, a little.
I'm confident you won't get that message this time.
And it's really just, and so if any of you have any questions, let us know and we can ask them when we're up there. APA and FinCon we're gonna see.
Now, is this at the new headquarters or the old headquarters?
The current headquarters is not new, and I know there's been a lot in the news, and I don't know what the latest is, but whether they'll be moving to Saranac Lake, I think is what was in the news. I haven't followed that closely, but may have some news for you in a couple of weeks.
Yep. So we're doing that on the 21st of November. Any other questions? for the executive director. Okay, contracts, resolution to approve the 10th Amendment to contract C 012012 with Kleinschmidt Associates. Mr. Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was the resolution on page 17, first of three for contracts, which are just an extension of time. And staff recommends extending the contract C01-2012 through December 31st, 2024. In this particular case, Kleinschmidt may be called upon to finalize or follow up on some final issues with the Hawkinsville project and our closing out of the payments, I guess, also to the contractor. And so we like to keep them engaged through the end of 24 in the event we need to ask them for some additional assistance if it comes up, if the need comes up. So it's simply right now as an extension of the contract time.
So
Given
you,
everything that went on there.
so you can ask for more money? Jesus.
For an additional 7,000.
Ken, I'm not asking that question. I don't think- But is he waiting for that bank to come into the river? Is that what you're wondering?
I hope it does not.
It does not.
It looks, and when I get to my report, you'll see the photos. It looks like that bank is fairly well stabilized now, so. Yeah, no, this is just simply an extension of the contract term. No additional fees.
You're not looking at any problems.
No.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the 10th Amendment to the contract.
Also,
Mr. Candio,
Second,
I'll second it.
Mr. Reagan.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? There was no discussion, I'm sorry, did anybody need, sorry. Second, resolution to approve amendment number 6 to the HDR contract 0222-012 to perform Stillwater Dam breach analysis, site-specific probable maximum precipitation study. Wow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The resolution's on page 20. This also is extending, request to extend the contract termination date to December 31st, 2026, as HDR is just continuing the work that's been previously approved, and as a result of review by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission of previous submissions, it's just taken longer to complete the job than we anticipated originally. So no fee changes associated with this resolution, just an extension of time also.
Oh, okay. So I need a motion to accept the,
I'll make it.
Mr. Reagan?
I'll second.
thank you for
Sound.
making me read that again. We had a second,
Yes.
Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, a resolution to accept amendment number 5 to the Henningsen, Durham, and Richardson Architecture and Engineering Contract 032018, Conklinville Dam, 4th Part, 12D, Independent Safety Inspection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That resolution is also on page 25. Similar to the previous two, it's just simply an extension of the contract to allow HDR to continue its work on Conklinville supplemental effort related to the previous Part 12, and that would be an extension through December 31st, 2025.
are there two of them? Because I
Yeah.
see one on page 22.
So there's,
You just referenced page 25.
yeah, he meant
20.
22.
Did I say
Thank you.
22
There's
for the
a,
previous?
there's a,
25 for this one, 22 was the previous.
right, there's a 5th amendment to the contract for HDR to do the 4th Part 12D. That's what we're dealing with now. The
Page
next thing we
22.
will
Yep.
deal with
Sorry about that.
is a new contract for HDR to do the 5th Part 12D.
This is just an extension of.
I don't need you to confuse me.
Well, this is, yeah, this is an extension of an existing contract on page 22.
I need a motion to accept amendment number 5.
I will.
Sorry.
Mr.
Do
Byrd,
we have a second?
Second.
Mr. DeWitt.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Lastly, a resolution to accept HDR's architecture and engineering proposal to complete 5th part of 12D independent consultant safety inspection of the Conklinville Dam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one is on 25. This is also an HDR contract. And the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, oh, and by the way, my memo is on page 25. So the FERC requires an independent consultant safety inspection of Conklinville Dam and the submission of an independent consultant inspection report, also known as the Part 12D report, every 5 years. The 5th Part 12D independent consultant safety inspection for the Great Sacandaga Lake project must be completed by February 3rd of 2025. Current regulations, FERC regulations, require a multidisciplinary team of engineers, known in the regs as the independent consultant team, to complete a comprehensive assessment of a dam every 10 years. It's a little bit different than the previous Part 12s that we've been required to complete at our FERC license project, where it was a single consultant, a single engineer who was identified as the independent consultant, safety inspection consultant. Now it is required that we have a team of engineers of various disciplines, depending upon the types of structures you have or the issues you have at your facility. And in the case of Conklinville, we have an earthen embankment, so it's geotechnical. We always bring in hydrologic. We have gravity structures, so it's structural engineers. But in any case, it's a far more complicated process now, and includes, the comprehensive assessment includes a potential failure modes analysis, a level 2 risk analysis, and field inspection. The 5th Part 12 for Great Sacandaga Lake must meet the 5th Part 12 as compared to the 4th Part 12 must meet the comprehensive assessment-based safety program requirements. Staff is, as such, we need to hire a consultant. Staff has evaluated the 3 most highly qualified firms which submitted annual statement of qualifications based upon the corporate and personnel experience demonstrated by the professional firms as it pertains to this particular engineering services need. The evaluation team determined that Hennessing, Durham, and Richardson Architecture and Engineering PC is the highest qualified firm to complete the work for the project. HDR proposes to use Mr. Brian Chrisman, PE, as the independent consultant, leading the team of the multidisciplinary team of engineers to complete the comprehensive assessment. Mr. Chrisman has over 20 years of dam safety and geotechnical engineering experience, specializing in earth dam stability evaluations and dam design. HDR's proposal, which is attached to my memorandum, includes a scope of services which appears to fully encompass the effort needed to meet the expectations of FERC and produce a comprehensive assessment report. Regulating district staff recommends acceptance of HDR's proposal to complete the 5th Part 12 independent consultant safety inspection of the Conklinville Dam and seeks board authorization to form a contract for the completion of the work and authorization for the executive director to execute an agreement for an amount not to exceed $369,500. And I'll be happy to answer.
And this is all part of our budget. I mean, we planned for all these.
Most of it.
So why don't you?
Well, I can let Tim handle most of this job will likely to occur in the next 3-year cycle after July, by the time we have engaged and have an approved contract. There will be some expense in this current budget year, which I don't believe, and I'll leave that up to Tim, is specifically budgeted.
Which is why you see in the resolution a transfer
Where you're taking the money from.
Yeah.
to pay for what is anticipated to be spent in the current fiscal year.
But I'm just thinking from a budgeting standpoint too now, so, I understand you move money around to pay for that stuff.
With your approval.
But, yeah, but this is more money than what we had originally, when we looked out at the 3-year plan that you're gonna do again, and look at a new 3-year plan. Is this a totally new expense that wasn't there prior, or was this a different amount than prior?
No, it was anticipated to be in the $200,000 to $300,000 range.
Okay, so it's just a different amount.
When FERC came out with the regulation change, about 2.5 to 3 years ago, we had anticipated it. But the timing of, and whether it was going to occur, we had anticipated occurring in the next 3 years, the 24 to 27 year cycle. But the length, duration of time, there's a 6-month window where FERC must receive and review and approve the team and the plan. And so we had to start this a little bit earlier than we had anticipated, thinking that we would have time after July 2024. Now we had to start it sooner, so we're having some of the expenses in the end of the last year of the previous 3-year cycle.
As Rob said, we will budget for the balance remaining on the contract when we do the next series of budgets and pull them before the board at its June 2024 meeting.
Okay, so this is something that now that's gonna have to be done every
10 years.
Every 10 years. Okay, so we're just.
Similar expense.
So we're just gonna budget for it
similar
every 10
efforts
years.
we'll have to, every 10 years. And we'll still have to complete what was previously the typical standard 5-year safety inspection on the every 10 years, alternating 5 years, yeah. So in 5 years, we will do another inspection with an independent consultant, but it will be similar to and less effort, but similar to the standard inspection.
Will one of those people be the existing person, or it'll be somebody different?
It'll have to be somebody different.
It will have to be different.
Yeah. FERC allows, now with the comprehensive assessment, both the team members as well as the independent consultant have to be different after their second effort on the project.
It just seems some continuity would be good too. I understand what you're doing,
Yeah.
or they're doing.
They think just the opposite. They have a new set of
Somebody
eyes
looking at it and coming.
reviewing it
So
entirely.
they're not looking at the same mistake.
That's right.
Now, this is all, how does this play into the Conklinville Dam
Reconstruction work?
reconstruction work?
Well, most of the time, as a result of the inspections, we've had our consultants make recommendations for either evaluations or remediation. So I'm hopeful that at this point we've hit most of the issues and concerns, but that safety team may find concern with something that hasn't been previously brought to our attention, in which case then we would have to respond to that.
But it's accurate to say, Rob, that the project we're advancing now, the state is advancing in collaboration with us, OGS, is a product of these earlier efforts.
Exactly.
And just like a future project might be the product of this work that's beginning.
That's right.
But does this 3-year window, this 3-year period of evaluation and study, does that overlap with the beginning of new construction after the new dam has been designed?
Well, it's.
Or does that, so you're not gonna design the new dam until this 3 years is
You would
up?
hope it would be, they would get it done prior, you would hope.
That's what I was
That
actually.
is, that is an
Yeah.
issue that FERC and FERC engineers have, we brought up to FERC, and FERC engineers have confirmed that it is becoming a problem. That
With
the
a lot of other dam
duration,
owners.
with other dam owners, with all their projects, in that it takes so long for FERC to review a study and evaluation that you get to the next fifth, part 12, and now you have a new evaluation, or you haven't completed the previous evaluations or made remediation, or you're in the process of making remediation, and then you have it reevaluated.
Right.
Standards have changed, the requirement now with a comprehensive assessment, you have a team of engineers who are gonna review, and that team will likely find, in order, and so you're in a cycle where you're never catching up.
Right,
To
and
the-
FERC has to review the design of the dam before you.
They will have to
go ahead
review
and
that,
start.
yeah.
And is that state money dedicated to this project, or do you have to go through each year to lobbying to keep the
Dedicated.
money?
It's dedicated to
Okay,
this.
And it's reappropriated
all right.
every year so that it doesn't just disappear.
But with the cost of inflation, and if
Well,
it's.
we ran into this exact problem with Stillwater, in that we completed an analysis based on certain seismic criteria, submitted it to FERC. It took them 12 to 18 months to review it. Between the time we started and finished, it was probably 24 to 36 months. In that time, the USGS changed the criteria for the seismic activity, and we had to, FERC commented on it, and their comment was, please redo the study and bring it up to the latest criteria, which, in that 3-year period, had changed, so.
Mind numbing.
It is.
Mind numbing.
We certainly hope that by the time we go through all of this process and first review and correspondence and all of that the capital project, the Conklin bill, will have been done by for a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think one of the larger components of the work that OGS is leading at Conklin, which is the stability of the spillway, will likely not change the opinion of my personal opinion is that I think when our team of consultants this time next year have concluded their review, I'm hopeful, and I don't suspect that they will have a different opinion on the stability. And even if it will, it will likely only mean a slight change in the design to make it stable, rather than a significant opinion that would affect the project that we have proposed for the spillway. So, happy to answer any other questions.
Then I need a resolution to accept the HDR proposal to complete fifth part 12D independent consultant safety inspection of the Conklin building.
I'll make that motion.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Any other further comment, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Staff and committee reports, audit committee. You're up.
I guess we had a resolution, we didn't have no resolution, but we had a resolution, we had the
Presentation.
We have to
presentation, get me straight here, of the audit there from Nora. And I guess it was accepted, and I guess that's about all we had.
Do we need a motion to accept? No. Oh, okay. Now, in that case, we move on to general counsel, Mr. Leslie.
So, I mean, I think I'm going to start off by saying, isn't it fun to have a FERC license, especially at Conklinville?
We could always not have a FERC license.
We could always not have a FERC license at
Really? Not required.
Conklinville. Well, or we could,
Stay tuned.
there might be another entity that could take over the responsibilities of the $40 million effort that the state is making on our behalf at Conklinville, and the $370,000 Part 12D studies that we have to do every 10 years, and they probably half that the other 5 years, and ongoing and ongoing. And yet, the entity best poised to pick up those expenses continues to make obscene amounts of money from generating at EJ West, right next door to Conklinville, using the assets of the state to do so.
Quarterly earnings just out, right, Tim?
Last Friday.
So with that as the setting,
You better watch it.
I hope so. That informs my editorial comment to John's report. I'm not itching for litigation with Erie, but in my 15 years here, I have rarely been as upset at an entity that does business with us more so than I am with Erie Boulevard right now. They're not paying us what is due under the expired reservoir operating agreement for the head that we provide that they use to generate power.
And we're compelled to continue to perform under that.
And under FERC's rules, under our FERC license and FERC's interpretation of our license, we are compelled to continue to perform, notwithstanding that Erie basically just said, screw it, we're not going to pay you. So since July 1, we've not been paid. So what we've done is we have sought the assistance of the Attorney General's office in really two respects. The first, we talked about last time, where we are seeking to bring an affirmative case against Erie Boulevard, compelling them to uphold their responsibilities under the original real estate transaction that obligated the regulating district to build Conklinville Dam, a structure which, what would it cost to build today? Hundreds of millions of dollars?
Oh, boy.
And
At least a couple $100 million.
And that say several $100 million project that is now utilized by Erie, they're not paying for. So we are going to try to compel Erie to basically meet the obligations that were established under that initial real estate transaction. It's their predecessor interest that obligated themselves, and our predecessor interest, which undertook the obligations to build the dam and operate it. The second thing, and that effort is going pretty well. We're talking with the Civil Recoveries Unit, which is part of the Bureau of Civil Recoveries at the Attorney General's office. They're indicating some interest in pursuing this affirmative case for us at the state court level. They have not yet told us that they are on board, but talks are going well. At the same time, we've been pursuing this series of petitions before FERC to get FERC to basically recognize our obligations and Erie's obligations and compel Erie to basically play ball with us. And FERC has basically said, we're out. We really don't want jurisdiction over this. It's a private matter between the regulating district and Erie, and you guys figure it out without our help. Oh, by the way, while you figure it out, you, the regulating district, are obligated under your FERC license to continue to perform, notwithstanding Erie is basically backed off and stopped paying. So as we've pursued those petitions through FERC and run up against rulings that were not favorable, we now are faced with the opportunity to take that fight from the administrative side, the administrative agency, FERC, to the US courts. The FERC rules and the statute forming the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission allow any final decision of the commission to be appealed to the US Court of Appeals, the second highest level court in the land, broken up into, I don't know, 11 circuits or something like that. There's 2 of those that would be relevant. One is the Second Circuit, which covers New York State, or the DC Circuit, which covers the federal administrative agencies. In the past, when we have gone after and sought to appeal a decision of the commission, we've done so in Washington before the Second Circuit Court, or before the DC Circuit, US Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit. A decision of that court, if appealed, would be appealed to the United States Supreme Court. We have asked the Attorney General, as part of our July request for representation, to represent us in this appeal should one become necessary. Because of the October 19th decision of FERC denying our petition for rehearing, that appeal is necessary. Our updated request for representation is a draft of our request is before the Environmental Protection Bureau at the Attorney General's office, who will employ the Appeals and Opinions Bureau at the Attorney General's office to file that appeal, which has to be filed within 60 days of FERC's decision. So where we stand right now is we anticipate making another request for representation to the Attorney General so that the Environmental Protection Bureau and the Appeals and Opinions Bureau will get together and within the next 30 days or so file an appeal. I anticipate that appeal would be filed with the US Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit, and we would be fighting against the commission as to whether or not they should assert jurisdiction over this dispute that we have with Erie. This is not dissimilar to what happened in 2006 when Fourth Branch Associates, otherwise known as Albany Engineering, brought a suit against the commission saying that they should exercise jurisdiction, and the commission said, we're out. The US Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit, in a ruling on November 28th of 2008, said to the commission, no. You assert jurisdiction. That resulted in the remand to the commission. It resulted in the Headwater Benefits determination. It resulted in a lot of further litigation and basically, brought us to where we are now. So what we are asking is the Attorney General bring before the same court that essentially ruled against us on a jurisdictional issue to now rule for us on that same jurisdictional issue, compelling the commission to take a role in our dispute with Erie. So
Just a couple of things to add, Counselor. I'll phrase this in the form of a question on our ballot, Trebek, but I think if I have this right, the one thing in the current FERC ruling, in the final order that we just received, that we continue to like a lot, is that they told Erie that they're wrong in asserting that the agreement we had with them was duplicative of the headwater benefits payments. FERC said, oh, no, it's not. This is something completely different.
Right.
Sort of allowing us, I think, to pursue this. So, council was talking about two different actions, one in the state courts, one on the federal side, and certainly will vigorously proceed down both paths. And then I've said it before, I think Mr. Fulton will agree, the people who rely on us to provide flood protection, flow augmentation, sort of count on us being able to walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. Operationally, we have a great working relationship with Brookfield, their professionals there. I continue to work very closely with them on water management. So as this fight continues and I think ramps up over the course of what's likely to be the course of several years here, frankly, we'll continue that good working relationship on the operational side, and our dispute in the courts will not in any way hamper our ability to provide those important public safety benefits to downstream residents. Certainly, a lot of downstream residents are also looking for us to protect their county taxes as well, and this is a big part of the story also. So,
Yeah, these expenses are not paid by government, they're paid by taxpayers. Whether they're ratepayers for utility or they are assessments levied against downstream beneficiaries, those downstream beneficiaries are funded by taxpayers. So we know that we're spending taxpayer money to pursue this claim, but we're losing $2.5 million a year because Erie is basically not agreeing to make the payments that they ought to be making. So anyway, that's the first thing I'm dealing with.
What interest are you getting on that monthly?
well, we're not getting any interest on it yet, but
So I'm saying, what do you charge them?
if you were,
So there's two interest payments at bar. First is if the Civil Recoveries Unit brings this suit and wins money back that is due to the district from Erie, they will assess a 22% charge against those monies recovered, which we will solicit from Erie. That's their responsibility.
not ongoing though. Is that correct?
Not ongoing. That will be what, $500,000 at this point we currently have not collected from Erie. So, another $100,000 on top of it. Thanks, Erie. Second would be if Erie says, you know what, we don't acknowledge or aren't willing to pay the amount that is due by New York State. New York State will impose the statutory rate of interest. I honestly don't remember what it is.
But there's a set number.
There is a set number. It's the last time I saw it was 9%. I'm a government attorney. I don't have the need to keep track of that number because it's a civil recoveries issue.
But that's automatic, that's gonna go on to the total.
That goes on for as long as you stop, as you fail to pay judgments that are due against you. Might be as low as 6%, but it's a good chunk of change that would be due.
And we still bill them on a monthly basis or however we did it prior?
We have penned a demand letter to ask them to commence their payments.
Yeah.
We've been in negotiations with them for years, have made demands in the past. There's no question in their minds that we believe that they owe, and that we would encourage entry into a successor reservoir operating agreement to the one that just expired on very similar terms where they would pay us a set
So
amount annually.
there's no
monthly.
doubt in your mind that whatever we needed to do to protect ourselves is being taken care of, is what you're saying.
Yeah, we've done what we needed to do. The Civil Recoveries Unit wants a specific demand letter that
Yeah.
articulates that 22% number in there. And we'll do that. That's, if not signed already and sent out, it's certainly within the next couple of days, we'll get that out of the way. So that's Erie. Stillwater is a little bit simpler. We continue to negotiate with Stillwater. I don't know how much, John, you want to articulate about our conversations?
I would characterize the most recent conversations as helpful. Certainly more productive than they have been over the last couple of years. I don't want to suggest the end is in sight, but we've been presented with maybe a slightly different construct, which, we haven't fully vetted, I think it's fair to say, or digested. Tim had a follow-up meeting with Mr. Tucker based on that concept. I think that's about as, other than convening an executive session, probably, I think that's probably as far as we go on that. Maybe heading in a more promising direction than it has been. Is that fair to say and answer your question?
The rest of it is just permitting and keeping Rob happy with contracts. Any other questions? If not, I'll conclude my report there.
Any other questions? Very good, thank you for the update. Very good. Very good. Director of Administrative Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is located on page 28. During the reporting period, I continue to work with our vendors on the access permit renewal forms. The forms are printed, the data elements should be ready this week, and then we'll be ready for the final print, at which point forms will come here and staff will stuff those in the envelopes in-house, and you can look for your renewal or email beginning in January if you have an access permit. I also performed the Hudson River Area Office Quarterly Compliance Audit. General fund actions were reviewed to ensure compliance with established policies and procedures. 8 samples were selected and no deficiencies were noted. The remainder of the reporting period, I worked on contracts, MWE and STV of your report and HR matters. That completes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the CFO report on page 32 of your packet. We've already spent a fair amount of time talking about regulating district finances this morning, so let me just highlight a couple of other items that I touched on in the summary. The federal fiscal year 2024 Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan was finalized by the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation on October 25th. The regulating district's Indian Lake Dam Rehabilitation Project remained on the annual list, enabling submission of a financing application. That financing application was submitted on October 26th. And I am in touch with them as recently as this morning about all of this, and lines of communication are open and remain very hopeful that this will be the source of the predominant source of funds to finance the Indian Lake project. Separately, auditors from the Office of State Controller concluded their security over critical systems audit of the regulating district. The evaluation included assessments of the dam's physical security, processing of credit card payments for permits, both online and through the web portal and in person, and policies and procedures for relevant information technology assets and systems. Auditors found that the regulating district has demonstrated effort and timeliness in addressing security issues as they arose. We expect to demonstrate similar effort and timeliness in implementing the recommendations contained in the audit as soon as we receive the final report. And on any of those matters, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions?
Hey, Tim, just on the payout for Dave, you have a new process in place that was part of that, that we put in after that other issue, the whole process. That worked good for you?
Yes. Now, before I relinquish the talking stick here, we do have the item of board member expense reimbursement to take up, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. I'd like to call your attention to the signed affidavit, including on page 55 of your packet, if this necessary and reasonable expenses incurred by board members relating to their participation in the October and September board meetings. Article 3, Section 2 of the Regulating Districts bylaws require the board to approve payment before any reimbursement can be made. And before you ask for a motion to approve these expense reimbursements, let me offer to answer any questions that you or any other board members have about them.
Looks good to me.
Any, in that case, need a motion to accept the expenses?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, Chief Engineer, Mr. Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report begins on page 56. Last month, reservoir operation has been fairly uneventful, lower than average, historic average precipitation, but that has allowed us to track very closely to our target elevations for all of the reservoirs. We continue to do that. And it set us up very nicely, I think, for the spring refilling. And assuming that we have something closer to historic average snowfall and runoff in the springtime.
First time
Things are looking quite nice right now, so in terms of reservoir elevation and preparation for the spring.
You may have just jinxed yourself a little.
That's okay. The
You can handle it, huh?
change in weather would be kind of welcome at this point. It's a little bit mundane and uneventful.
Kind of gray out right now.
So, after 24 years, I guess I need a fall that's uneventful. Don't want any flood. What's that? Haven't had any flooding, no.
Great Halloween flood. Oh, geez, got all that crap that put on the beach.
Yeah. That
You
concludes
done?
my
Okay.
report.
Any questions? Thank you. Next, board member questions and comments. First of all, from here, we took a lot of time, and I think we really worked hard on this terrestrial issue, and I want to thank everybody's effort and time, and we spent a lot of time on it. And I think we came to the right conclusion.
Yeah, I think we ought to though figure out, John, what we can do to improve that process. Maybe nothing, but we ought to just spend sometime just a few minutes or something, just saying, okay, here's our process, and I don't like trying to figure out who I'm not getting the right information from, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well,
It's kind of a.
I think the issue, he was so adamant making presentation styles, and that's what took the time, which he's allowed to do.
But again, he put a lot of money and stuff into that, and, I just can't believe, I guess I'm so freaking naive, I just can't believe somebody would leave here with what he had in front of him, and then go out and do exactly what the hell he wanted.
So, we issue a couple hundred work permits a year, but fewer than probably a couple of dozen are for things that are anything other than cutting brush and, routine work on your permit area. And there are some things we do allow, and that necessitate a site visit, clarity, clearly worded work permit, which I believe this was, and a site visit in advance of the meeting, or the construction work. So, I mean, I think the area, the room for improvement we've already identified is looking at any potential for confusion in the work permit that's issued. When it says at the top, your permission to construct a retaining wall is denied, we look at that and say, well, that's very, very simple, and we believe it was. But then below that, there was permission to use round river rock for bank stabilization, and he interpreted that, according to him, differently. So I think, you know, there are opportunities to make sure, Mr. Reagan, that we're communicating accurately, and we're also providing, as council has articulated the need to do in the past, clear sight to the regulations, the board policy, the statute that governs not just our administration of state lands around the reservoir, but we're not in the cockpit by ourselves, right? We've got APA flying the plane with us, we have DEC, and they give us license to make certain decisions that fall below the need for review by those agencies. So there's an opportunity here. I think Rob and I have talked about it, Dan and Danielle and I have talked about it. We spent some time over the winter, you know, making sure we're communicating as effectively as we can and tightening things up and up to and including, you know, what Rob has mentioned for a couple of years now, which is adopting new seeker and regulations that add to that clarity. So I hope that.
You know, I don't really want to talk about it, but I listen with it. But I look at that wall, and really, this is where I go to, Jen. I look at that wall, and I got a wall that's deteriorating, and I want to fix it somehow, of going on. And, you know, and that's what that guy, you know, basically did, except he expanded it when he did it. He did some things and made it bigger and stuff. There ought to be a process there where this is what you can do, and, you know.
Well, I think there is. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
And that's the part that, where I'm a little disconnected. The other thing, I just have a couple of personal experiences. I wasn't even gonna bring them up, but, you know, when you tell me you're not telling me we don't need to look at the process, but I think we do. I put in a permit to have some trees cut down that were damaged trees. Haven't touched any of them.
Okay.
Purposely haven't touched them. When I go and look at them, there's a red mark, and it's not the worst tree. It's not the one that's broke over and bended. And I'm looking there and I'm saying, I think I'm an average person, I'm on the board and I'm trying to do the right thing. Now, if I went and cut that whole clump, somebody could come and say there was only one tree marked there.
Can you talk to me and to the board about the process? You applied for a work permit.
Yeah, they came and marked them.
in.
Yeah, I wasn't home, I wasn't there when they did that.
Did you, typically we'll ask that you tag the trees that you want to cut, so we can, did you?
You know, they're bent right over. I
Okay.
did not tag them and stuff. Nobody told me that, John.
Okay.
But they're bent right over and broken, and 2 or 3 of them are broken right inside of there.
So we did not issue a work permit, or we
You
did?
did.
But just.
You did, but if I went and cut down what I thought I was right, I could be wrong. That's what I'm saying. I could very easily be wrong of going through and doing that. My gut says cut them all down.
Well, I mean,
I haven't touched them.
Well, this is why.
And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's why on this one, when I say there's some gray areas, I think there probably are. There's some things that, and anytime you get into a situation like that, to me, the most important thing is, what can you do to improve your process so people don't make mistakes? You know, in business, they call it, you know,
Continuous improvement?
Yeah, but it's part of the continuous improvement. It's I call it porcupine because I don't say the right word, but you make it so, you know, no matter even somebody as dumb as me is not gonna screw it up. And that's what my viewpoint is. What are the things that we can do to just help reduce the questioning that can come up?
Well,
And I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble or anything. I am just looking at it as a person and saying, hey, what do you wanna do here? And how do you improve that process?
Well, I think
forward.
one of the benefits to having board members who are permittees is from time to time, you'll apply for a work permit and personally experience the customer service we provide, and you're in a good position to comment on whether it was excellent, as we like to think, or it has room for improvement, as I think you're articulating now. It's one of the reasons at the bottom of each work permit, Danielle Thorne's contact information is there. Any questions? reach out, which is certainly what we hope Mr. Bresney had done in this instance, and hope you would do too if you had any questions about.
When I get ready to cut, I will.
Okay.
But I've actually,
Remember, your work permits expire at the end of each calendar year.
Yeah, I got a few days.
Yeah, okay.
I gotta get going here. But I purposely haven't touched them because I really been hesitant about saying anything about it because those guys are working. I don't have anything against what they're doing. My only point of bringing that up is process improvement. They need to take a look at it. And I always kind of take a look at things when I do something wrong, which is often. I try to say, how can I make it better in the past, and the next time I go and do that. That doesn't mean I'm very good at doing that, but I at least go through that process. I mean, that may surprise you, I'm gonna do that, but I do.
Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that, Mr. Chairman. I've been thinking about this for 2 months. And not to belabor, but I've been in government for 47 years. I think I've learned a couple things, probably not as much as I should have, but I learned a few things. And I was also in the enforcement business for a long time. And there are times where I want some gray areas so I can have some discretion. But most of the time, I didn't really care. I just wanted to be told what you wanted me to do. But when I had a conversation offline with our 2 permit people, I think they're on the same track. And I think as a board, at least other boards I've sat on, and this board when I took this appointment, I think our biggest role is policy. Governance and oversight, yes, but what does it really mean? And it's setting policy so that the real working people on the line, they're not left out to dry. They know exactly what they need to do. And there's a gray area where how much should a board develop procedures versus just policies. And I've always felt that policy, then from policy, you determine your procedures. But the one thing that's been shining out to me, and I've never, once I just asked my questions and I got my facts, that was where my decision was. And there's no question about it. Matter of fact, I wanted to be punitive on this one, but it took me weeks to slow down on the punitive side of it. No punishment, because there's enough punishment just having to go through the expense of undoing what was done. But why don't we require, as part of a procedure, diagrams, sketches, not engineering plans? I have to get a canal permit because I'm not here in this regulated district, but I'm on canals. Even if it's a sketch, I draw it out. I do this and I do that, and the permit people look at it and they'll clarify. What did you mean over here? What did you mean over here? Is this where you wanted to put this? We don't require that. I think that should be something that your procedural process should look at very closely. And in the case of trees, et cetera, photographs would help. If you can't be on premise personally for that, maybe that needs to be included in the process. In other words, I'm just always trying to look at what can we do to avoid this. And in this case, there's quite a few things that can be looked at. And the gray area, misinterpretation, yeah, okay. I look at that. Like, here's your wall, and you can put river rock over here. And it's like, what, river rock over there? Now, okay, I've been on, did you ever do those exercises where you go around the room and everybody tells a story? By the time you get to the 12th person, it's never even happened close to it. Right. And that's what happens when you have those conversations. Just like the guy who shows up with the clipboard on the edge of the property. I know. Really, I've heard that one. So it's like, okay, so I just add my 2 cents as a board member that I support the staff, and I support the director, and I support all that has to be done to make these things come to life in their every day. I'm confused. I was still uneducated, so I didn't make judgment. But when I asked you multiple times, where'd the 5 yards come from? Just tell me, what's it grounded in? I'm not arguing it, I'm not debating it, I don't know enough about it. And I think one time you told me it had to do with the seeker, which dates back to 1980-ish. So if that's in the seeker, then that should be in black and white in some kind of procedure.
Mhm.
And if it's not in the seeker, if it's gray and it's a judgment, it's an engineering judgment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then those should be requirements of whatever, just the width, because I asked you if it was 5 yards, what if my waterfront's 50 foot wide? But what if I own two lots and it's 100 foot wide? It's still 5 yards on that project, but I'm gonna go double the length or the width, so maybe I need 10 yards. So I don't know where that is, and it didn't sound like that's any place that somebody could look up and say, here it is, and apply it as an equation. So that's my,
So like a lot of things, what was approved in the board's original 1980s seeker goes far beyond what we could permit in some cases without consultation with DEC or the APA. Here we had not necessarily the seeker, which might permit up to 25 yards, or maybe it's in excess of 5. But we also had a draft MOU with the APA dating to 2006 or something, which informed practice going forward at the staff level. So APA had said, you know, these are things you really don't have to come to us with. And that practice has evolved over time to have less of a correlation with either our seeker or the state seeker or regulations than would make Mr. Leslie, and I assume the entire board, comfortable because you're missing that.
Right.
thing.
I became very uncomfortable as I looked at our seeker. It has its own regulation, our own procedure in there. It has our supplementary type 2 list, which is what it is, could be updated. That project, right, just updating our seeker would certainly be helpful. Mr. Bresney is probably the best example of a person who can come in to the situation and actually provide you with the diagrams that you would want to see as part of the application process. Picking out what we allow and what we don't allow, I tried to do in a policy document that is currently on our website as our draft policy. The board has never adopted that policy, but it tries to articulate what we permit and where we derive that permission or that authority from. But that is certainly open to interpretation. If the board looks at it and goes, oh, this is bullshit, then, excuse me. Sorry, Mom. The board is in a position to look at that document and direct staff as to how they want to modify that document. In John's defense, one of the things he asked for a couple of years ago was a permanent administrator who would be responsible for all of this. John's got a lot of things on his plate, and I don't think he has time to be that permanent administrator, to look at our process through the eyes of somebody who's done it for 20 years at DEC or who does it for APA, who understands the application process, the elements that you have to go through, the seeker review that you should go through in each time. Obviously our folks understand that stuff, but they're set in their ways and they're not necessarily heading in the direction I think you're looking for them to head in. It might be helpful to have somebody who comes in from the outside, looks at our process, changes that process, and requires somebody like Mr. Bresney to provide diagrams and photos and paragraphs and has a standard set of general conditions, a standard set of special conditions that would be imposed on every single work permit that we issue. Somebody who's going to compel you to articulate exactly what trees are going to be taken down and why, who's going to think through, you can't take down 1/3 of the trees and have somebody take down 1/3 of each tree so that they create a view shed. There are, places that we could tighten up our procedures. There are places we could tighten up our policy.
Yeah, let me just say, I don't think Dan and Danielle are set in their ways. They've been very responsive to, direction for me and tweaking things, improving process, improving customer service, which they're, I think, very adept at to begin with, as well as Stephanie Porter, who's our first line of defense with all the folks that come in here to the lobby looking for help. But they're looking, I think you alluded to it, they're looking for clear direction. They're looking to be able to point to something, and I think that's a lot of what Mr. Leslie's talking about. But just one brief spirited defense of that team, the whole team, who I think, again, we interact with so many permittees on so many different issues. And the, 998 that we've resolved successfully have not been subject to the board's review and discussion. 2 now have been, this and Mulgrew Garcia a couple of years ago, where that permittee said, I'm going to go through the appeals process pretty much because I want to see. It doesn't cost me a lot of money, and I'm hoping, but at the same time, sort of admitted, you got me. But lots of, I think we take away for all the board members who have encouraged us to look inward and see where we can improve. We want to do that each and every day. So
yeah. And again, I don't want to, but one thing that's come up a couple times that people have said, we need to support the people that are here and stuff. And I agree with that. That's not something I totally disagree with.
Don't support us if we're wrong.
If you've got good processes and stuff, people ought to follow the processes, you ought to be all set. But if it's automatic, I'm 100% I'm going to support regardless, then I don't want to be part of the process. Matter of fact, I don't think we ought to be part of this process. Personally, I think it's really, we ought to put the processes and help to get processes in place, but the enforcement and all that, I don't really.
We look at it as validation when.
We're not really part of the process till there's an appeal.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying this, if we are, the first discussion is we need to support the folks here. Our first discussion ought to be, we ought to get this right based on what our processes are. That's what goes through my mind when I hear that, of going through. And I know, I see different people look at me and say, hey, you're full of shit and stuff like that. And I'm sorry too. I am to a certain degree, but if I'm not there to take a look at the facts and try to come up with what I think the right decision is based on our processes, I shouldn't be part of the process of resolution. I shouldn't be there.
Just one thing about trees. My neighbor about 10 years ago,
Trees up.
they asked for permission to take a tree down. This was a fairly large tree. So he got permission to take the tree down. Take it down. So he took it down and dropped it on the road.
Well, I'm far enough, I won't hit any roads.
That's why Saratoga County's bad.
Oh, anything else? This was valuable. Thank you. The next resolution we're going to have is for the next board meeting. But before we do that, our next board meeting was on 1/9, which means we're going to go through the whole holiday season without a meeting. So I want to wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, and New Year, because we won't meet till after all that. And thank you for all your efforts this year. I appreciate it.
Just a second.
And having said that, we need a motion for our next board meeting, which is 1/9 here at SFO.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Reagan.
And again, just emphasize, no December meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Then a motion to adjourn?
I make that motion.
Second, all in favor?
Bring me a cup.
I try to.